number 2. If you watched my first video, thank you so much. I'm hoping that this video turns out a lot better. I've learned how to do some editing, which I did not know how to do when I did my last video, so it's kind of just like boring and plain. So I'm hoping after I film this video and edit it, it will be a lot more entertaining, and I'm excited for this video. I'm talking about the comics versus the show of The Walking Dead. I'm doing some major comparisons of some things that I think are the biggest differences. I haven't read the comics for a while, like it's been a while since I started them, so I had to review some of the stuff to get the information I wanted and just double check and make sure I had everything down. If I do mess something up, please feel free to correct me. I'm not saying I'm 100% right. This is mostly just what I picked up on and my opinions about everything, like what I prefer versus, or show versus comics and whatnot. But I love talking about this because there's so much that's different between the show and the comics, and it's really cool to see how they use these things and like change it and make it into something else, which some of the things I really don't like and some of the things I love. So I'm just gonna start talking about that now. Sorry, okay. So I'm going to try to do this in like a chronological order. First, I'm going to start off with things in season 1, and I'm just going to keep moving in order as I think they happened. And I'm also going to have a part where I talk about how the characters are different. We obviously have some characters added into the show that weren't in the comics and whatnot. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the CDC. I reviewed the comics and didn't find it, and I don't remember reading anything about them making it to the CDC in the comics. But if you've watched the show, you know the season finale, season 1, they are at the CDC, a bunch of stuff goes down, Rick finds out that they're all infected, they learn some stuff about how it all works, and kind of find out that there's not really much hope for a cure at this point. Personally, I feel like adding that into the show is amazing. It just kind of, it was a really cool thing to add. But yeah, like I said, I don't think the comics had anything like that, so I definitely think the show did great by adding that. Now I'm going to move on to Shane's death. Shane dies at the end of season 2. Obviously, if you watch the show, you know what happened. Rick and Shane have this ongoing tension because of Lori and everything that's happened, and it all kind of boils down to this big fight where Shane and Rick pretty much fight till death, and Rick wins this fight, and Shane dies and turns, and Carl pops out of nowhere and kills Walker Shane. In the comics, this happens differently because we have Rick and Shane just kind of arguing, and little Carl pops out of nowhere and pops Shane. He actually kills Shane, human Shane, not Walker Shane, which is a lot different. Killing Walker Shane versus human Shane, it's just a big difference. You're killing a monster versus a human. It's kind of crazy in the comics, a little bit more brutal. I actually prefer the way that it happened in the show, just because I like the whole part where Rick's kind of just like, he kind of thinks that Carl might be like aiming at him. He thinks that Carl saw him kill Shane and now Carl wants vengeance or whatever, but it's actually just that Carl saw Walker Shane and he was protecting his dad. This is also the moment when we find out, you know, that you can turn without being bit, which kind of reiterates the whole we're all infected thing to the storyline. So that's one difference. Carl's a little savage. I mean, he's a savage no matter what, but that's a big thing, I think. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Carol and Sophia. Obviously, we know in the show that Sophia died in season 2. She was found in the barn. In the comics, Sophia is actually still alive, and she has this really cool storyline growing up with Carl, and there's just a lot of interaction there. She's kind of raised by Glenn and Maggie in the show after, or in the comics after Carol dies. In my opinion, I would like to see Sophia's storyline carry out like it did in the comics, just because, I don't know, I think it'd be cool to watch them grow up together, and like later on in the comics, obviously we have a really cool like storyline between Carl and Sophia and Lydia and stuff, but we're not gonna get that, so okay, now I'm going to talk about Carol. Carol is crazy in the comics. I do not like Carol in the comics at all. Carol is actually in this love affair with Tyrese, and Tyrese cheats on Carol with Michonne. When Carol finds out, she like slits her wrists, just kind of goes crazy. She makes moves, like romantic moves, on both Lori and Rick. It's just really uncomfortable, really weird. And she ends up feeding herself to a walker tied to a pole, which is just kind of outrageous, and just kind of leaves Sophia to fend for her own, which is just really not the greatest. But obviously in the show, like, Carol is one of my favorite characters. Her character development has been amazing. She's saved the group from so many things. That woman is capable of anything. I love Carol. So that being said, I guess it is for the best that Sophia was killed off, because it really pushed that character development and made Carol who she is in the show. So I'm okay with that, given we get Carol, who is just amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of differences there. It's kind of crazy how that all played out. Now I'm going to talk about Dale and Andrea. Andrea obviously died in season 3, and in the show, or in the comics, she's actually still alive, and instead of it being Rick and Michonne, it is Andrea and Rick. I like comic Andrea a lot more than show Andrea. I feel like they kind of just didn't do the best by her character in the show. You know, she was with Shane and the governor and just didn't make the best choices all the time. And in the comics, she's actually with Dale. They have a romantic relationship. I know in the show there was just this kind of weird relationship, but it was not romantic. In the comics, it's definitely romantic. And I don't know how I feel about, like, I don't know if I would have wanted to see the Dale-Andrea thing on screen. Or if I prefer the way it is in the show. I guess I don't really have an opinion on that. I do really like Michonne and Rick together, so I'm glad that that happened in the show. And she had a different storyline as far as the Andrea and Michonne storyline. That didn't really happen. They didn't have that, like, whole friendship thing that they developed on their own. And Dale, I love Dale in the show. I feel like I like him better in the show than the comics, that's for sure. But in the comics, Dale is actually the one that has the tainted meat scene that Bob gets in the show. And I would have preferred to see Dale do that in the show than Bob. I just think it's a really cool scene, and it would have just been amazing if Dale got the chance to do that in the show. I just feel like Dale's show death is really stupid. Like, I'm gonna go follow the sound of a cow and still manage to die even though I have a shotgun. Like, it was just lame. He deserved better than that. Now I'm gonna talk about Herschel. Herschel is a lot different in the show versus the comics. I love show Herschel. He's one of the best characters in my opinion. He brought a lot of humanity to the show, being his person, and I loved his speeches and everything. In the comics, his character's just kind of lame and whiny. He has a bigger family in the comics, actually. He has Maggie, Billy, Arnold, Lacey, Susie, Rachel, Patricia, Otis. I cannot talk. And in the show, it's obviously like Maggie, Beth, Patricia, Otis. I think Sean's in the barn, and then Jimmy, which isn't really his family. It's Beth's fiance or something like that. I forget. So later I'm going to talk about Beth, because she kind of replaces two characters from the comics. I just feel like that the show Herschel is a lot better than the comic Herschel, because everything I already stated. I think Herschel in the show actually got Tyrese's death from the comics. In the comics, Tyrese is the one who gets his head sliced off with a sword by, by the governor. And obviously we know that Herschel gets that death in the show. And I feel like that death actually fits a lot better in the show, just because Herschel, he brought so much heart to the characters and to us as viewers So when we took that away, like, it was a good turning point for everyone. Like, just seeing his last moments and feeling the end of all of this just long storyline between the Rick and the governor, like, it was the final point, and it was heartbreaking. And I feel like if it would have been Tyrese, it wouldn't have had as much as an effect that it did. So I definitely think they did a good job replacing Tyrese with Herschel in that case, even though none of us would appreciate seeing Santa Claus get killed on screen. I also wanted to mention that Tyrese's death in the show is completely stupid. In my opinion. So that's the end of that. I feel like I'm talking really fast and just like going through this, but I have so much, like, this video is going to be so long. I made note cards to remember. Maybe I should make more than one video. I don't know. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the Michonne and Governor arch. I've already talked about some stuff about Michonne when I was talking about Andrea. But, you know, obviously in the show, Michonne and the governor have their own fallout when he loses his eye and everything, but their whole arc is a lot more brutal. Like, this is really brutal. If you don't want to hear something that's brutal, please stop watching right now, because some of this is just hardcore. In the comics, Michonne actually bites off the governor's ear within their first meeting, and she gets tied up, captured by the governor, and she's raped and tortured and beat for days, and it's just awful. When Michonne actually ends up getting freed from this, she takes vengeance, and it's not pretty. She ties up the governor the way that he had her tied up, and she drills holes into him, bites a chunk out of his neck like Joe style, pulls his fingernails off with pliers, and cuts his arm off, and then scoops his eyeball out with a spoon, like a hot spoon, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, that's a lot more brutal than it is in the show, so I can kind of see why they wouldn't keep the same brutal arc. But personally, I don't know, I mean, it could have been kind of cool, but it would have damaged Michonne's character a lot. And I'm not saying that it's cool because of, like, it's not cool. None of that was cool to talk about even. But I don't know. I guess it could have worked either way. But I don't think that's something that they would air on television. So anyways, I think I like the way that things went with Michonne better in the show. Now I'm going to talk about Judith and Lori. Obviously, we know that Judith is still alive in the show. Well, it's not like that in the comics. Judith is actually killed in a different way than, well, I guess she's not, Lori is killed in a different way than she is in the show. In the show, Lori dies during childbirth, but in the comics, Lori actually survives her childbirth, gets to know her kid a while, and it's actually heartbreaking because in the show, the governor is the one that takes Lori and Judith away from Rick when he comes to attack. The same battle where he gets Tyrese, he kills Herschel in the comics. In the comics, Lori is actually shot from behind while she's holding Judith, and the bullet just obliterates both of them at the same time. It's really graphic, really sad. The person that did it, when she realized she was holding a baby, just, like, lost her head. I'm pretty sure that if I remember that right. So there you have it. Judith dies in the comics. That's how she dies. Obviously, she's alive in the show, which is kind of cool, kind of unnecessary. I don't know. Depends on how you look at it. Now I'm going to talk about characters that weren't in the comics but are in the show. And let me tell you, the first one I'm going to talk about, we all are going to be thankful for this one, is the Dixon brothers. Okay, I love both of them so much. I am so glad that they put these two in the show. It gave some great twists, some great storylines. Daryl, obviously everyone loves Daryl. He's such a badass. Some of you hate Merle, some of you love Merle. Some of us had feelings of both at the same time. It's kind of confusing. So for Merle, I just want to say that the whole rooftop thing and then Merle actually surviving that and coming back later in season 3 is actually really cool, because I never saw that coming. It was a great surprise. And he just brings so much character, and he ends up going out like a hero. And I love that storyline. I love it because he ends up trying to protect his brother, knowing that his brother has made a family out of their group. And Merle does the right thing and gives his life for this whole purpose, which is really sad, but I love this part of the storyline. That episode was great where he died. Not because he died, but just because he got a great way to go out. Obviously, we all love Daryl. Who doesn't love Daryl? Actually, I know some of you don't, but Daryl's great. Please don't argue with me. Just kidding. You're entitled to your own opinion, but I don't want to hear... No, I'm kidding. Yeah, Daryl's just fantastic. He's not afraid of anything, really. So I'm really glad that they put them in the comics. Alright, now I'm going to talk about Lizzie and Mika. Lizzie and Mika do not exist in the comics. They're actually a replacement for Ben and Billy. And there's kind of a similar storyline where, like, one of the boys doesn't quite understand walkers, where, in the show, Lizzie doesn't quite understand walkers, and she does some really messed up things. Okay, so... I think I wrote this down, but I don't know where I wrote it. I'm pretty sure it's Ben. Yeah, it's Ben. Ben is the one that's kind of like messed up. His brother finds him like tearing open a cat, I think it is, in the comics. Like we see in the show, Lizzie was experimented on like rats and stuff. Well, obviously Ben does the same thing that Lizzie does, and he kills his sibling, which was his twin brother Billy. So Ben kills Billy in the comics, and in the show, Lizzie kills Mika. Kind of the same thing. Ben and Billy's parents were actually part of the original camp. It was Alan and Donna, I believe, which they both ended up dying, and Andrea and Dale kind of were looking after them at this point. And Andrea finds Ben after he's killed Billy, and Ben's telling her, like, hey, Billy's gonna come back, you'll see, like, trying to show the same thing that Lizzie kind of did in the show. But it brings up this whole controversy about what to do with Ben. And it's more of a group thing instead of just where Carol made the decision, look at the flowers. In the comics, it's not that simple. Andrea and Dale are, like, arguing with people about it. And Carl takes it into his own hands to hunt down Ben and kill Ben for killing Billy. So this is the second human that Carl has killed at this point. Little savage, let me tell you, taking matters into his own hands. No one knows who did it. It starts a whole fight. Wow. I can't say I blame Carl for doing this. I don't know how I feel. I think I prefer the comic version, actually. I don't know why. I guess I like the Carl part. I like Carl stepping up and making that choice, even though he's like a little fetus in the comics when he does this. But the comic has a lot of development for Carl, and this is a big part of it. So there's that. The more you know. Now I'm going to talk about Sasha. Sasha does not exist in the comics. Instead of Tyrese coming with Sasha and the rest of the gang, Tyrese had his daughter, Julie, who actually ends up dying. She had some sort of pact with her boyfriend. They were supposed to shoot each other at the same time. His boyfriend shot her, and she didn't shoot him. Just like a whole controversy there. That's kind of, just so you know. Sasha's not my favorite character. I guess she brought a lot to the show. She did go out like a champ. I appreciate her sacrifice, though it didn't make much of a difference in the end, I don't think. I don't know. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Beth. Okay. So Beth replaces Susie and Rachel. She doesn't exist in the comics. In the comics, Susie and Rachel are at the prison. They make it to the prison, and they're actually killed by a prisoner named Thomas Richards, who cuts their heads off and later tries to do the same thing to Andrea before he gets caught. And I actually met Lou Temple at a Comic-Con or Walker Stalker Con in New Jersey, and had this conversation with him. Some of you may not believe me. I have pictures to prove that I met him. I didn't record the conversation or anything, but he was just a great guy. made conversation with me about the show, and he actually told me that there was an alternate ending for Axel's character where he actually takes Beth to the woods and chops her head off. So in the comics, they thought about bringing that whole part into the show, but using Axel instead of a different character to kill Beth, which I'm actually really happy they didn't do because I like Axel. He was pretty cool. I don't know how many of you are even going to remember him, but that stash, though, it was great. I just really liked Axel. I'm glad he wasn't a murderer in the end. But I will say Beth's death really, it sucks in the show. It's stupid. Personally, since they killed off Sophia, if I could choose the way that Beth's character development went from, like, season 3 on, I never would have done, like, the Daryl-Beth dynamic. I personally had always thought that Beth and Carl would be, like, a good friendship, relationship duo type thing. In the show, Beth's only, like, 18. I know Emily is a lot older than that, but it would make more sense for Beth to kind of have a relationship develop with Carl because they're closer in age, especially closer than her and Daryl. So in my opinion, it would have made sense to have a Carl-Beth ship going on. And I think that Beth replacing Sophia, as far as, like, the comics go with Carl and Sophia's relationship, it would have been cool to see Beth kind of take that over and have it like Carl and Beth and Lydia later on, even though, once again, we're probably not going to get that storyline because they're killing Carl. Not over it, guys. Not over it. Okay, so there's what I think about Beth. Please leave your opinions. I won't be offended. Alright, now I'm going to talk about Noah. Obviously, everybody hates Chris. Okay. Noah's not in the comics. I do really like his character. I don't even know why, but I liked him being in the show. And honestly, I loved his death. I just loved that scene. Hated to see him die, but I just thought it was really cool. So I thought I would mention that. And my last thing is Morgan. Morgan is in the show and in the comics, but I feel like in the show, Morgan's storyline is a lot better. I loved the all I see is red bit and, like, his psychotic break and everything. And I'm really sad that he's leaving The Walking Dead and going to Fear the Walking Dead. I just feel like, they could have picked a better character to do that with than Morgan, because he just has, like, this great story about him, this great, I don't even know, he's just great. I love it all. So I'm really sad that he's going to Fear the Walking Dead, but hopefully he continues to be a really cool character on that show. I'm not sure how they're going to take him out, but I guess the more we watch, the more we learn. So that's everything I have as far as the comparison between the show and the comics. Like I already said, there's obviously a lot more differences than that. I just kind of picked some stuff that I thought was really cool or interesting or should be talked about, and I talked about it. So subscribe. Please like this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you would like me to talk about any other differences. I hope this video isn't too long, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'm not sure what my next video is going to be or anything. Just stay tuned, I guess. Thank you.